Hi folks, it's fascinating. This conversation around digital is actually as dynamic as the subject matter itself. In the 5 years I've been talking about digital, it's gone from being sci-fi out there to over the hill. Every consultancy now has a digital practice. Business media devotes pages and pages to it. We in our companies, we've got digital projects here and there. Many of us have chief digital officers. So everybody's talking about it. Most people are doing it, and a few are actually doing it well. So good morning again, folks. I'm also actually a BA. I'm not the BA that Caroline spoke about earlier that can't get it up. I'm Brian Armstrong. As Ryan said, I'm a businessman with about 30 years experience running big companies. But I'm also a professor of digital business at the Wits Business School. And once upon a time, I was a scientist, so I actually understood about 10% of what Adriana said. And so now people call me a business scientist. And what I try to do is unpack and make sense of this thing called digitalization. And when I look at it, often we find that our digital strategies look a bit like this. We're in this pantry full of all these cool ingredients and goodies. But what we lack is the recipes and the techniques to translate these ingredients into a great meal. And we lack a strategy which translates a single dish into a great overall experience of eating in a fine restaurant. And if we stay in this place of just having this jumble of ideas, we're actually not going to go very far. If I look at I took a group of global leading companies that have done really well at what they've always done, but they've gone nowhere. They have shown a growth of about 1% over the last 10 years. This is actual share price data. If we look at a different group of companies that has worked hard on transforming their businesses to become digital businesses, they've done much better. They've shown a compound growth of about 10%. But if we look at the true digital players, those guys who are actually what I call the digital natives, the convergent digital players, they've delivered incredible results, 40% compound performance over 10 years, thousands of percent growth over the period. The question is, what can we learn from them? What are they doing right? Now, over the last 10 years or so, I've had the privilege as a technology provider to them of speaking to captains of industry and leaders of business in South Africa and beyond about what are they doing in their businesses on their digital journey? What's working, what's not working? And as the Chief Operating Officer of Telkom, I've done it to myself. But at the same time, the scientist in me is a bit worried because there's a lot of hot air in this field of digitalization. It's all based on anecdote and unsubstantiated stories. So at the same time, I try to probe what is the substance of digital and put it together in a robust, more scientifically rigorous model. And it's this blend of practical, real-world, make-it-happen experience, but built on a solid foundation and an understanding of what digital really is that I try to bring to my conversation around digital. And I start off by saying that digital isn't primarily about the tech. The tech's important, but digital is actually the intersection of technology with transforming society and new ways of doing business. And this intersection is what makes it so powerful. Understanding what it is, though, is only a first step. We need to figure out what to do about it. And for that, we need a strategy. And strategy at its most simple is choices we make about where to play and then how to win. And in my talk, I unpack 4 areas about thinking about where to play and a checklist of 10 points about how to win. So folks, my conversation on digitalization isn't to talk about the future, about change is coming and how big it's going to be. I take that as a given. What I talk about is what to do about it, starting now. And I'd love to be a part of the conversation at one of your future events.
Very good. So, Brian, I think the first thing, as you're talking, and I think it's important to make it clear, is when we talk about digitization or digitalization, we get the sense that, okay, you must be talking about technology businesses, the ISPs, internet and cell phones and that sort of thing. But to what industry does this apply to? Who are you talking to?
So I've done an analysis of the South African economy. About 61% of the South African economy is at high risk of substantial digital disruption over the next few years. Another 30% is at risk, at medium risk of substantial disruption. So it applies to everybody, point one. Point two, it doesn't, what I try to make sure I unpack is that it doesn't only apply to the people in IT or the executives in an organization. Everybody from the head of your accounts receivable department to the sales manager of the Cape Town branch needs to understand what it means for their area and what they can do to move forward in this field of digital.
One thing that you said resonated. We get it. Things are changing.
Yeah.
You go to a conference and we hear that, Uber's the biggest taxi company and Airbnb's
Yeah.
We've heard this. We get it. Things are changing. What does this mean for me? So how are you addressing that side of the conversation? You've said you take it as a given. So where are you going?
So the whole point is, as I say, I try to create a structured model that is not this jumble of thoughts and ideas. It's a case of if people need to do something with it, if they want takeaways about how do they apply it in their business on Monday, you need a sort of a structured model and a way of thinking about it in an organized way that probes questions for people. So what does this mean for my business? What does this mean for my department? Because it's only when you get down to that level in a structured way that actually gives some tips. It's not a recipe for success. Let's be clear. There's no recipe for success. But it is a few tips and ways of thinking about it in a structured way, asking the right questions for your business or your part of your business.
All right, so we've been focusing quite heavily today and pushing quite heavily today this idea that a conference cannot be a data dump. It cannot be a place to just come and hear speaker after speaker. Delegates leaving a conference have got to go, okay, I can change something right now. I mean, the biggest problem many have, I think, is they spend an entire day like today at a conference, and the fact is they're going to have to get back to the office on Monday with 180 emails demanding their attention. So how do you translate all this information you heard into changing your situation right now? So when you are presenting, what are people taking away?
So when I'm presenting, what they're taking away is firstly, the one thing I want them to take away is it's not primarily about the tech. Because if you think it's about the tech, then it's somebody else's problem. It's actually about our market. It's about ways of doing business built on the tech. So that's the first thing I want them to take away. The second thing I want them to take away is this sort of list about, so how do I win? What are some of the things to consider in how to win? And it's something that everybody has to take away. I think it is fair to say in a conference, and so how would mine fit in? I think it's fair to say mine is more speaking to the head than the heart. There's many of the other speakers you've heard today that speak to the heart, which is very important in any conference. Mine is a little bit more about speaking to the head and giving people practical guidelines about what to do when they get back to the office.
All right, well, fantastic, Brian, and it is incredibly important. There's no doubt that we are at an amazing time in human history. The potential is fantastic, but the potential pitfalls are also there. We've got to understand where we're going. So I think the role you play is incredibly important. So, and given your pedigree and your history in business, it adds an incredible element of credibility to what you bring to this conversation. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brian Armstrong.
Thanks, folks.